Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Today we're heading to the heart of South Central Alberta to explore the SouthGrow Regional Initiative, a collaborative powerhouse that's redefining what it means to work together. SouthGrow isn't just an organization, it's a network of municipalities united by a shared vision. With a member driven approach, it brings elected officials, community leaders, businesses, and government to the same table, working hand in hand to spark economic growth and unlock opportunities. From fostering innovation to streamlining shared services, SouthGrow proves that when communities collaborate, great things happen. And at the helm of this dynamic alliance is Executive Director Peter Casurella, a leader with a deep passion for regional development and a knack for turning vision into action. Today, Peter and I sit down to share how SouthGrow is driving change, building partnerships, and empowering communities to achieve more together. So sit back and get ready to be inspired by the power of collaboration.
Peter, thank you so much for doing this. Greatly appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming, Chris.
I want to talk about a important subject that is important to you, but also important to South Central Alberta, and that is SouthGrow.
Thanks.
What is SouthGrow? For those who are tuning in, who are listening to this right now, who are going, Chris, what's SouthGrow?
Well, thank you. SouthGrow is one of Alberta's 9 regional economic development alliances. Now, the background on the Regional Economic Development Alliances, this is something that's fairly unique to Alberta, and that is a competitive advantage that this province has. The REDAs, or the Regional Economic Development Alliances, were created in 1998 was when they first started up the experiment under the Klein-era government. And the thought back then was, listen, guys, let's take our limited tax dollars that are available for provincial economic development. Instead of just spending them de facto straight out of Edmonton, trying to decide what's best for every corner of the province, what if we leveraged our dollars against municipal dollars by partnering with municipalities in economic regions around the province? And, if you're in the Fort McMurray area or north of Edmonton, your economic opportunities are very different than they are down here in southern Alberta. So the thought was, let's set up these regions and work together with the municipalities, leveraging our dollars against theirs. They have to put in some money as well, and stand up some nonprofits, basically, so that we can further leverage our money. And now we're going to work on provincial economic development in partnership with local expertise. So the local people who know the opportunities in the region and who are able to effectively inform us on what's going on there are going to lead, and we're going to back them up. So the experiment started off in the late 90s up in central Alberta and then expanded to fill out most of the corners of the province. There's very few spots that never had a REDA set up. There's a couple of reasons why they didn't set them up. Places like Fort McMurray, they had more money than God. There was no need.
They still do.
They still do. Yeah, Fort McMurray, Wood Buffalo Economic Development is extremely well funded and very well staffed. Or places like West Yellowhead, where the population was very, very low, and the spirit of collaboration just wasn't able to get rolling there in the way that it has in other areas. So today there's 9 regional economic development alliances that cover about 90% of the province's population outside of the major CMAs. I'm talking about those areas around Edmonton and Calgary where there aren't REDAs because they're just dominated by the regional economy of the city. But outside of those CMAs, 90% of the population is covered by those 9 REDAs, and they effectively work to do regional projects in those areas. SouthGrow is one of them.
So SouthGrow's area, from what I understand, and you're the expert of this, so I'm just going to throw out some names and you're going to tell me if I'm right or wrong, goes from Vulcan County.
Yeah.
All the way down to Warner County.
Down to the border, yeah.
Down to basically Coots.
Yeah.
And what east and west, which way, how far?
We go as far west as the MD of Willow Creek and as far east as the county of 40 Mile.
So that's a very large area.
It's an area about the size of Belgium.
Okay. Yeah. So going back to your original statement about why our REDAs were set up, each individual one of those municipalities has their own unique challenges, has their own unique views and ideas of how they're going to solve issues. Where does SouthGrow step in to help all municipalities, all businesses to drive economic development?
Yeah, and so this is the sticking point. So historically, the REDAs have worked on regional economic development, and there's a clear distinction to be understood between community economic development and regional economic development. I don't do the kind of projects that your local CAO would be concerned with that only have an impact in your individual community. Occasionally we do community level projects, but that's not our bread and butter. We work on projects that all of our communities have a shared interest in, but none of them have a mandate to do, because it's bigger than their boundaries, because it involves, working on projects and spending money that would exceed their borders, that kind of thing. So a good example is broadband. So we worked on broadband deployments for the better part of a decade, when everybody was desperate to try to catch up and provide this essential service to their communities. There was that giant gap between the telecom era and the fiber-driven era as well. So we ran around mapping the assets and then starting to build partnerships across southern Alberta. P3 partnerships, go after grant funding, get government funding from our municipalities or grants from the federal or provincial government, and work with private companies to try out new technologies, to get things cheaper, to do new deployment methods. We worked with Fortis on, things like how do we deploy new infrastructure faster to respond to builds more efficiently. And we got to a place a couple of years ago where we have some of the best broadband options available across southern Alberta of any rural area in all of Western Canada. And so my board looked at it and thought, this is no longer a priority for us. It's not a pain point that anybody is reasonably hurting on, because it doesn't matter where you are in southern Alberta, you can get very good internet now. Starlink has been a big part of that. Let's not kid ourselves. But there's options everywhere, and people have price and technology choice options. So that's a good example of a gap that we filled, because nobody else really had the capacity, inclination, or expertise to chase it down and work on it. And SouthGrow did.
So we're recording this in the first part of 2025. Literally the first part. It is day 8 of 2025. Yeah. I want to talk about the past before we talk about the future. Mm-hmm. Looking back in 2024, 2023, 2022, we just got through a global pandemic, love it or hate it. We had restrictions, things got shut down. How has the SouthGrow area grown or developed more broadly to the ever-changing sort of global challenges that we face and the global influences that we had faced in the past few years?
Well, it's actually been a really, really positive story. And I'm not saying this to minimize anybody's particular pain points or the trauma that they endured during the pandemic, because individual sectors, individual people, individual businesses were seriously harmed, and folks lost their livelihood. But at a macroeconomic level, southern Alberta did really, really good out of the pandemic. Global trends over the past few years, geopolitical conflict, shipping disruptions, supply chain disruptions, have took a hammer blow to the global's food security system. And we grow food. We grow a lot of it. We have the ability, because of our dry climate and the fact that we are home to 80% of Canada's irrigation infrastructure, to pivot and grow a lot of different kinds of crops sustainably. And we've got a great, well-developed primary egg industry down here, which has decades, if not centuries, of experience doing just that. So the globe's problems have been kind of our benefit, and the egg industry has boomed because of it. Primary egg is our bread and butter, but there's been more and more and more agri-food processing that's been looking at the region and moving into it. We've surpassed Prince Edward Island as the primary potato growing, or the largest potato growing area in the entire country of Canada, which few people know because PEI is just famous for it at this point. But we've got 4 major potato producers in southern Alberta, and they've all expanded or are expanding currently. Some of them have been doubling the size of their ability to pursue production.
But growth over those years comes with its challenges.
Yeah, it does. Labor, of course, has been the tight thing. It's been a double-edged sword. I mean, we have faced continuous growth, but getting the labor to fill out those jobs has been the continual challenge. There's a lot of bottlenecks. There's been a lot of disruption to things like temporary foreign worker programs, which our companies have had to ride out. Costs have spiraled up and up and up on the labor side as the labor market is constrained, and companies have had to contend with those problems.
Looking back on the last year of 2024, with everything that has gone on, whether it be the outsized forces or even the labor shortages, this area seems to be booming.
Yeah.
Even with all those challenges, with all the uncertainties that we have on the global market, what do you chalk that up to? Because when I've just driven down from Calgary and I'm touring around after I'm done this interview, it seems like everywhere's growing. Mm-hmm. there's housing being built left, right, and center. And when I hear from federal and provincial leaders that there's a housing crisis and no one's building, you come to this area and it's booming.
It is. Even our most remote villages in my region, every time a house goes up for sale, it sells. If you're in Arrowwood in the northern end of Vulcan County, if a house goes up for sale, it sells. And the prices are climbing up and up and up. It's hard to build there because it's not very cost effective to build for home builders. But along the main corridors, yes, building is ongoing and is going rapidly. And our communities are genuinely trying to work with developers to help make it easier for them to build. I think that's a real win on the part of our communities. It is a story that you're going to see in many corners of Alberta that you have probably seen, though, too. I mean, Alberta as an economy is booming. It's a very attractive place to come to. And we've seen a lot of interprovincial migration. As the economy has been hurting in other areas, folks come here. And there's a lot of things going for Alberta in the current era, and for Southern Alberta in particular. It's not just the oil and that sustained economic engine that keeps Alberta firing on all cylinders. It's not the lower cost of living. It's not just that. There's, we have the mountain quarter right here. It's an attractive place for people to want to come and raise their families because they have things to do that feel like, outdoor adventure, active living. But for Southern Alberta, it really comes back to the agri-food because there is a shortage of really good arable land in the world, and the population keeps getting larger and it keeps getting richer. The global middle class is growing rapidly. Africa is going to add, 3 billion people to the middle class by 2100, something like that. And these folks want better quality food, the kind of food that you and I get at the grocery store. And all of those things require inputs. And then you throw on top of that disruptions to supply chains. Everybody's very, very nervous about securing supply chains for food. If we head into something like, God forbid, a global war sometime in the next couple of decades or so, folks need a domestic source of food. And there's a shortage of places in the world that can really ramp up and scale up in order to provide a lot of that stuff. And then throw on top of that, too, the fact that one of the other major breadbaskets in the world with really good soil, similar to what we have in Western Canada and the Western United States, is Ukraine. And it's become difficult for them to grow and scale their agricultural operations over there. So we are at the right place at a critical point in time when the world is all desperate to secure their food supplies.
I have to ask this. I have to start asking semi-political questions
Yeah, sure.
here. Do you think the story's being told about this area? Because you are booming. People know about it, but like you said, people don't know that we create more potatoes now than PEI, and PEI is literally known as the Potato Island. What can we do, and what do municipal leaders in your area or across Canada need to do to start promoting themselves so that way people understand that these smaller, and I hate to say rural communities because there are still urban city villages, tell their story to attract more investments and help organizations like SouthGrow do that?
Well, this is one of the things that we're actually doing right now. And so I'm so glad you asked about this question because I get to brag about it. You're right. First of all, you're absolutely right. Nobody knows where Southern Alberta is in the global sense. When I started in this job 7 years ago, started going out and attending agri-food shows in the plant protein space because that was the big trending thing at the time. And we went over to Europe to some shows. We went around the United States, my friends and I from different organizations who have a similar mandate. And we quickly figured out, nobody knows who we are. We're from Canada. Sure, they got that. Where are you from? Alberta? No. Calgary? Oh yeah, what didn't they have the Olympics once? How far is it from Toronto? A couple of hours? That kind of thing, right? There's no sense of scope. There's no sense that we are a player in this industry. And so about 5 years ago, SouthGrow and our partners at Economic Development Lethbridge and at Alberta Southwest, another RETA just to the west of here, we started working together to build a global marketing program. We took a bunch of training. We learned how to build and deploy messaging on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter at the time and other major platforms to directly target the decision makers of agri-food companies. And now we're in the third year of running a really, really robust global marketing campaign that's built on awareness. We're directly targeting decision makers at global agri-food companies with the messaging about Southern Alberta and our unique advantages. The fun thing that we're working on right now is our program and our marketing is largely funded by the federal government and the Trade Commissioner's Office. And we've been focused on Europe and the United States because it's low-hanging fruit for the first 3 years. But they've basically said, okay, we're going hard at Southeast Asia because there's a ton of opportunity. And so I've been having to learn a lot about the Southeast Asia market over the past 6 months or so in preparation for this, because I never marketed into Southeast Asia before. It's a new thing for me. And it's fascinating because all the trends I've been telling you about before, about why we are booming, we have unique advantages that speak directly to their anxieties down there. So for example, I attended a virtual conference. I virtually attended a conference in Singapore in November. That was an agri-food show. And there was folks from companies all across Southeast Asia and the Middle East, and other global firms that were down there to learn about the market too. And every single session across 3 days of conferencing, they talked about climate change. It wasn't the topic of every session. It wasn't the topic of a majority of the sessions, but it came up again and again and again. They have anxieties within the tropical belt that we don't have here in Canada. The projections for even the good projections for climate change for places like Singapore and India and Indonesia and the Philippines are very concerning. Because, number one, they don't have a ton of arable farmland. They have a lot stronger temperature spikes, which really, really impact the ability of seeds to germinate. So they're looking at supply problems. And they're in the primary area of the world where there's geopolitical tensions and people are really, really worried about supply chains. So a place like Singapore, with however millions of folks that they have, if there was a global war tomorrow and international shipping shut down, they can't feed themselves. And they're very understandably anxious about that. They need to have food supplies that are, number one, climate sensitive. They need to know that they can sustainably produce food. It's an imperative for them, and they're much more concerned about climate change than we are here in the Northern Hemisphere, where our projections are nicer. Number two, they need to know that regardless of what happens in the geopolitical sense, they have a food supply, that there's secure sources of food to feed their people. And they are looking at all of these options. Now, we're a breadbasket. We produce food sustainably and at scale, and we have a lot of experience innovating in the food economy. We have a lot to learn and sell to each other. They've been focusing on innovation so that they can produce food in a constrained environment. That's something that our people could be very, very interested in because we've been spoiled by a great climate and an abundance of land. So as we continue to scale and use our land more efficiently, we can benefit from their experience in innovating in the food environment, both modifying your crops and modifying how you grow to do it more efficiently. And they can benefit from the fact that we can produce supply at scale and we're a very stable source of food. Nobody's going to invade Canada, jokes about Trump aside.
Okay, so I'm going to play a little devil's advocate
Sure.
for a second, because understandable, the businesses that are set up here in SouthGrow are helping the world economy.
Yeah. Southern Alberta feeds the world.
Understandable.
Yeah.
But we now live in a world that is dominated by the me factor. What are you doing for me? So what are these businesses? What is the Rita SouthGrow doing to help the municipalities? Because all this is great, but if we're not supplying ourselves, then it's going to be double-edged sword. So how does the windfalls of these businesses setting up in Southern Alberta benefit the average person on the street who is walking down and going, I don't know what you do and why it benefits me?
Yeah, constantly. It's the fun part of this job is that I constantly have to sell what I do. And folks, like, we operate behind a veil of, you're not in front of me. How do I say this?
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. That's a great way to put it. And so we routinely have elected councillors who are like, okay, why are we paying this bill? Well, what are they doing and why do they exist? And so I come before council and I list all of the things we're doing. And I draw the connection between what we're doing and the impact on their community. And they pay the bill. And they keep funding the RETA and they keep supporting it.
Give me a high-level example.
Got a great example. Okay, let's talk about renewable energy.
Okay.
So when the RETA was set up back in 2004, it was when SouthGrow was incorporated, we did a series of studies that basically looked at what are our long-term economic opportunities? We have this new thing. What should we actually be working on? And one of the things that they said was, okay, renewable energy, you might not hear about it very often in 2004, but it's going to be big. Wind power, solar power, it's going to be a big thing. For context, solar didn't become economically viable on its own until about 2017. But the research said it was going to be a big thing. So in 2007, SouthGrow and a couple of other organizations decided to work together across southern Alberta to do exactly what we're doing with agri-food, market the region as a destination and the natural advantages. Because we have great sustainable winds coming down off the Rockies, we have lots of land available, and we have the best solar potential in Canada. So if you want to set up a solar power plant in Canada, we are the best place to do that. And that marketing and the messaging that we provided to industry, to government, going to all of the trade shows, telling the story of southern Alberta, led to interest that was validated by people succeeding at business, which created a steamroller effect. We've had billions of dollars of investment in southern Alberta. Now, the impact of that is felt by our municipalities in the linear tax assessment.
Okay.
The jobs aren't a ton.
Yeah.
But the linear tax assessment has been a game changer. The county of 40 Mile, for example, 4,000 or so people, has over half of their operational budget provided by linear tax assessment on wind and solar alone. The MD of Willow Creek up Highway 2, same thing. Over half of their operational budget provided by wind and solar linear tax assessment. Vulcan County to the north, they had a massive hole punched in their budget by taxation abandonment from oil and gas companies after the last big bust cycle. And they managed to sustain their budget because of the construction of new wind and solar farms in that area. There has been a gold rush on renewable energy that has created all the problems you're hearing about in the media today. So basically, regulations and legislation lagged behind the gold rush on the new industry and its potential so badly that it created all the problems which have led to the current political conversation. And the government having to say, whoa, we got to slow down because things are broken here and there's problems and we need to fix it. But that's just an adjustment cycle. And our counties are still wanting more responsible development in the space because it has been a game changer. So the impact to the communities. Someplace like the MD of Tabor has millions of dollars in linear tax assessment available from these projects that they can use to sustain the quality of life for their people. And that money trickles down and benefits the communities that are within their footprint. That's a particularly good example of the impact of the work that we do behind the scenes.
Does the future look optimistic?
In which sense?
With everything going on in the global economy world right now, because we have... businesses get driven because of the economic winds that are in that era. We now live in an era where we are literally about 13 days away from President Trump being back in office with a potential 25% tariff on all goods in Canada.
Yeah.
Could that hurt the area?
Yeah. I don't know enough about the volume that we particularly export to the United States to tell you.
You're mostly going.
The stuff that we export goes all over the place. A lot of it goes to the States. A lot of it goes down to the Port of Vancouver and overseas, et cetera, et cetera. But we're selling essential goods that people need.
So then I want to flip the original question then. What do you hope for 2025?
I'm not worried. I'm really not worried. Once again, not to minimize anybody's particular individual impacts, because, every time there's a change, there's winners and losers. I always tell people economic change brings opportunities and it brings pain.
Yeah.
If you pivot and look for the opportunity, you can succeed. If you don't change when things change around you, that's the problem. And frankly, from the macro scale, our economic opportunity in southern Alberta is fantastic. We're geopolitically stable, pending nuclear war, which nobody wants and which we'd all be screwed. We could enter a global war and we'd be fine because, once again, our primary industry is agri-food. And there's an entire continent and an entire hemisphere, even if we can't ship overseas, that needs to buy food and feed themselves. And that would just drive domestic investment locally from our governments and from our businesses anyways. There's increasing opportunities for onshoring as production becomes more efficient and the global business environment is getting a little bit scared about the industrial plant and industrial base that we have built out in China. China's looking economically dicey right now for a lot of different reasons. And there's a lot of companies looking to move their production base to other areas.
So you talked about how the South Asian Pacific region is going to be an area that this area is going to be focusing on, or has been focusing on, Singapore.
Yeah.
What locally are you focusing on in 2025 from a SouthGrow perspective?
Yeah. So one of the other impacts of the pandemic has been a loss of capacity to do community level economic development. Before the pandemic, there was 6 community economic developers across my 30 or so communities whose full-time job was community economic development. And I worked with and alongside them, but I didn't have to do their job because they did it.
But now...
Yeah. Our municipalities, for many reasons that you've talked about on your show, have faced tighter and tighter budgets as there's been a downloading of costs and other costs have gone up, and they've felt the pinch because they don't want to just pass on, massive tax increases to their own ratepayers. And economic development is one of those, how do I put it? It's really nice to put money in your retirement savings, but you have to pay the electric bill first. You got to pay the bills first. It's a nice thing to have. It's a thing that people love to have to invest in their future. But when you have to trim something, it's one of those things that usually gets trimmed. So we have a lot of folks around the region who have a partial portfolio that includes doing community economic development. But the reality is it usually doesn't get done because their other portfolio eats up all their time. It is a specialized thing that most people don't usually know, that you really do need some expertise in this in order to do it well, and not much gets done.
But on the flip side, and I'm not trying to take away from what you just said, a lot of your members are smaller municipalities.
Yeah.
And I say like smaller in the sense like 300 to 500 people.
Yes.
And their tax base is already low to begin with, and they can't go ask people for an extra $80,000 to buy an economic development. So what do municipalities need to do in the short term besides partnering with SouthGrow and saying, you do it?
Well,
they can do themselves.
Part of our strategic mandate that is changing because of these new realities is that we're going to focus more on community ec dev, because now, number one, we're not stepping on anybody's toes.
Yeah.
I've got one full-time ec dev in a community, and that's in Tabor. Like, they are the only full-time ec dev in one of my communities, is the town of Tabor.
Not even Lethbridge.
Well, Lethbridge isn't a SouthGrow community. They're a partner.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. So we work in partnership with Economic Development Lethbridge, which has 11 full-time staff. But
okay.
In the SouthGrow communities, there's only one person who has it as a full-time dedicated job, with all of the expertise and expectation of expertise that comes along with that. The MD of Tabor is hiring somebody right now, which is fantastic. That'll bring us up to 2. But the board just went through a 3-year scheduled process to look at our strategic framework again. And they basically said, we need community ec dev. The regional stuff we're doing is great, but where we're all hurting is at the community level, and none of us have the time or expertise to do it, but we have SouthGrow, which does. So 2025, we're trying to, we've already put in all the applications for the various grant programs. I am trying to staff out another position who I will support, and his entire job will be to spend 2025 and part of 2026 building specific, achievable, custom economic development plans for each of our communities. We did this in 2011, but it's been a long time since 2011. And so we want to redo it for all of our communities. And then that position, the way I've tried to set it up, will continue on for another year and a half past that. And their job is to work with each of our communities, like case files, in order to help them implement and learn how to implement and provide them with the training that they need. To do community ec dev at something like the village level, you don't need a full-time economic developer. You need somebody who can help you out, who can help you figure out what your specific opportunities are, and who can, kind of hold your hand and coach you to do it yourself with your volunteers and your CAO and your resources. Carmen Gay is a great example. In 2011, the economic development plan that my predecessors built for the little village of Carnegie, which has 300 and some people in it, recommended a series of things that they could pursue. And the CAO at the time and the council slowly and carefully picked off all of those little items. They revitalized a downtown store into a community center. They chased some grant opportunities that we helped them go after in order to offset all of their electrical costs with a solar build at a time when there was really good grant options from the provincial government in order to do that. They got that. They went and built 10 light industrial lots out near the highway, which are slowly being filled up and eaten out. They participated on a broadband project with us that got them really low-cost, high-speed internet in the village of Carmangay without having to do fiber. And this was before the days of Starlink. They slowly picked away at the achievable things that were their opportunities. And now they're in a much better place and a much more sustainable place than they would have been otherwise.
Because that's the thing with a lot of these smaller municipalities in today's age. We just saw 2 smaller municipalities actually dissolve and one amalgamate into their rural counterparts.
Yeah.
Because they weren't thinking long-term, they were thinking short-term. What can the province do in 2025 to help areas like SouthGrow, help municipalities focus on that regional economic development rather than that local economic development?
Well, let's throw the elephant in the room right on the table and dissect it. Yeah. So
that's why I asked.
Yeah, no, the province started the RETA program. Yeah. Visionary folks said this will be a great way for us to work together with our municipalities and leverage our resources together. I don't do hardly any projects without leveraging federal or provincial money or private foundation money or business money, building P3s. And I can do a lot of things because I'm a nonprofit. And I'm backed by 30 municipalities who all throw their political weight and their moral weight and the moral weight of all the nonprofits and charities in them that I can call upon in order to put lipstick on the thing that I'm trying to get funded. And so RETAs are extremely good at leveraging funds, which ultimately benefit the province. And so every time a minister has come along over the past 20 years and has said, why are we doing this? Let's get out. We go back and we sit down with them. The RMA and Alberta municipalities have always been supportive because they get it too. And we say, no, you're doing this for a good reason. Please reinvest and stay as partners with us because these are the outcomes that we've achieved and these are the outcomes that we get. And this is what's possible when we work together. And it's always come back around.
Because when's your mandate done?
I got
27?
2.5 more years. 2.5 more years under a current agreement with our funding from the provincial government, if that's what you mean.
Yes, that's what. Yeah. Do you think the provincial government's hearing you?
Not right now. The situation we're in right now is that the minister in charge of the file has said, for a variety of reasons, we're going to exit funding these organizations. And it's a partnership model. So they put in a certain amount of money for operations and project funding, and our municipalities are required to put in a certain amount as well. They said we're exiting that, and they've got a staged agreement with us by which they will be out of that by 2028. Ministers change all the time. And the situation we're in right now is that when the premier was elected, she gave this particular minister a mandate letter that said, work with RETAs, specifically in the mandate letter. This has not happened. We have a economic...
Minister, if you don't mind me asking.
Minister Matt Jones, in charge of jobs, economy, and trade. Yeah. We have a rural economic development plan, which was built by his predecessor, Brian Jean, in partnership with Nate Horner from agriculture and irrigation.
The finance minister.
Yeah, now the finance minister. The economic development in rural Alberta, or EDRAP plan. Nate Horner led that development, and he consulted extensively with rural Albertans. And everybody I know in rural Alberta who works in the space loves it. We feel like we were listened to, that the feedback we gave to the government was reflected in that plan, and it is good policy. And it is current government policy. And in that plan, one of the 5 pillars is work with the regional economic development alliances and lean into the benefits of this collaboration with municipalities. That's not being done. The rural municipalities of Alberta has a policy. It's basically calling on the government to commit to their partnership and stay the course, and to help those other RETAs who might be struggling to basically get behind them, help improve their outcomes so that their outcomes can be similar to what we've seen in other regions like SouthGrow that have had really good outcomes. And Alberta Municipalities has a similar policy in place too. So everybody's saying this is a good idea because it is a good idea. The execution in specific cases in different areas has lacked sometimes. And sometimes that's for personality reasons or a lack of funding, various things like that. But I think that groups like SouthGrow have shown what's really possible and the impact that a REDA can have when it's well run, people commit to it, it's professional. Like we followed Bev Thornton in Alberta Southwest in becoming professionally accredited by the International Economic Development Council, which meant we had to build out and improve our processes so that we could be internationally recognized as this is a good organization who's doing things right, who is professional and accountable and well-trained and well-staffed, and the board has got all the right processes in place for accountability, etc. There's a lot of opportunity for the government of Alberta to come back to that role and say, no, it makes sense for Edmonton to partner with regions, for regions to leverage their local expertise. And I think that Edmonton could really be the engine that could help improve those regions that have struggled. If they put their moral weight and their moral force and
I mean Edmonton
behind,
as in the provincial government.
yeah, as the provincial government.
Because I'm thinking Emergent, so he's probably not going to be thinking,
No.
let's work with SouthGrow.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
You know, they have a big check in their hand, and that carries with it a lot of ability to set the agenda.
Yeah.
And get the outcomes that they want and get behind these small regions and help push and improve them. One of the beautiful things that came out of the EDRAP plan, the Economic Development and Rural Alberta Plan, was that for the past couple of years, I've had to show in my operations plan that I submit to the government in order to get the partnership funding, how the projects I'm working on align with that plan and the priorities of the provincial government, which makes sense. If they're paying a huge chunk of my check, they should get a say.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful way for them to get the outcomes they want and to take ownership of them, make us dance, our municipalities dance to their tune and focus on their priorities. But also, you know, we couldn't be doing this. Our villages and small towns don't have the financial flexibility and economies of scale to fully fund everything we'd like to do by ourselves.
One last area I want to talk about before I let you go. You have 30 members, if I'm not mistaken, from what you said. 30 members, the smallest municipality, the largest center, which is a partner. How do municipal leaders go back to their community and say, this is a good benefit? This, while I might not be seeing the economic windfalls of a new giant regional facility in my backyard, my contribution to SouthGrow helps not just my community. We talked about how it helps me, but how do you go back to your community and say, this is helping the region, and I got to stop thinking about just, and I'm picking on Sterling because I just sat down with the mayor, but I'm not, it's not just helping Sterling, it's helping Colehurst, or Coaldale, or Arrowhead.
It's had to become culture.
Do you think it's there?
Yes. Yeah, it is.
That's why it works.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's why it works, because people here understand when we work together, we achieve more. So we have new councillors often come to the board table, not often, but it has happened. And they say, what's in this for my community? And the response is, it's not about what's in it for your community. You're not here to represent the village of Sterling, for example.
Again, we're just picking on you, Trevor. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, Trevor. You're here to be one citizen of Southern Alberta at a table of fellow citizens. We're here together as a region. You're one of those people. You're here as a Southern Albertan, as a member of this region, not as a member of your community. That's the change of perspective. I'm here to say, okay, what can we all do together, all of our communities together, not what can I get from this for my community? And, you know, there's an element to those people who...
Is it hard to balance those as the sort of the overseer of your whole organization? Is it hard to balance because you want the best for all your community members?
Yeah.
But it's just like a municipal leader, right? You know, you have a certain amount of money. You're only going to be able to help a certain amount of communities each year, put in a new something or whatever.
Honestly, it hasn't been hard. It's constant, but it's not hard. Because number one, I get the smart people on my board. When they say who wants economic development, it's usually the smart person or the nerd who sticks up their hand. And so I get a really, really high quality group of volunteers who oversee the organization and who are ambassadors for it,
Yeah.
and go back to their council and say, no, you don't understand. You've got, like, they can explain things like the investment numbers that we've gotten from renewable energy over 20 years and how that's impacted the regional economy. They can explain things like nobody is marketing Southern Alberta on the agri-food industry except these folks. Nobody is saying we exist. You should consider us.
Agriculture Canada?
Not really. I mean, they have a lot of priorities, right?
But still, you seem to be the bastion of like growth and sustainability. Like, do they know? Like, does Ag Canada? And I'm gonna ask the political question, and we're going off topic, but I'm gonna have to.
We're a long way from Toronto, man.
That's true.
Like, Southern
seat in Lethbridge.
Yeah, we're a long way from Toronto. We've got one seat in Lethbridge. We've got a couple of MPs across Southern Alberta, and
do they know what you do?
Yeah. We.
So if you went to Martin Shield or
go to Martin Shields, go to Rachel Thomas. We have multiple touch points with them every year just to make sure that they're out there. They help us with things because a lot of what we do is partnership building. Our MLAs and our MPs are all very supportive, and they all help us achieve the partnerships we need to. They go to bat for us. They'll walk across the aisle. They'll go into, ministers' offices in Ottawa or in Edmonton to chat them up. And our local elected officials at the provincial and federal level are very supportive and very helpful.
So my final question for you here, because I just looked at the clock and we're about 40 minutes into this already.
Nice.
That's the great thing about the show. It just seems like it flies by when we're recording, and then I have to listen back and go, Chris, why'd you keep on talking like I'm doing right now? What do you want people to take away from SouthGrow that we haven't talked about yet?
There's probably going to be listeners in a lot of different areas of Alberta. And I want to say this carefully without feeling like I'm bragging, because
do it.
Okay, so SouthGrow.
Janet Bush, mayor of Mayerthorpe, is going to be listening to this. Well, I will get an email from her probably.
Janet will listen to this. Janet's awesome.
Yeah.
So Janet's in charge of another RETA, as you know, and she's trying to get arguably the smallest RETA back up on its feet and re-secure buy-in from the communities north of Edmonton. And there's a lot of opportunity up there. And if she can pull it off, they will all be stronger together. SouthGrow is killing it. I'm very proud of what me and my team have done and what the board has enabled by holding this thing together and by supporting our work and enabling our work from the communities. Our membership has stayed strong through a lot of ups and downs. We've had to increase our per capita, and our communities have stayed invested, and we've done a ton. And the impact that we are having is being felt. I want other people in other parts of Alberta who maybe have had a bad relationship with somebody, or they just don't understand the benefits from collaborating on the economic development file, or why should Edmonton put money into the RETAs? They're all going to go away in anyways, to understand that these things work. And if you can get the communities in your region to adopt that mindset of, yeah, I'm from this community, but we're all in this together. We are stronger when we work together. We can accomplish a lot more when we work together and achieve more economic outcomes. Sustained effort over time produces big results, but you got to sustain it. And democracies are particularly bad at sustaining the kind of efforts that is needed in economic development for the timescales that are needed to get something like the 2-decade outcomes from renewable energy marketing and investment of billions of dollars and many millions of dollars of operational budgets being funded by that kind of thing. That kind of outcome can be accomplished in every region of Alberta in their specific industries, whether it's aerospace up in Alberta Hub in the northeast there, whether it's forestry and oil and gas development up in Reddy, whether it's getting the rail links up towards Alaska coming out of the Grand Prairie area, whether it's advancing things like the Howe Pass initiative in central Alberta, some of these large scale things that take a lot of people to pull together. You can get the outcomes and it's worth it. But you got to have that mindset of all in it together.
So I said that was going to be my last question, but there's always one more that I was thinking of last minute, and that is there's an event coming up. And for those who listened to the interview with Trevor, he kind of spoiled it already, but you have an event with all your members who are going to come together, and thank you for inviting me to MC it. I'm looking forward to that. What do you hope to take away from that event?
Yeah, so it's the Southern Alberta Economic Development Summit. It's happening at the end of March, and will
March
be
27th
March 27th.
in Lethbridge.
You're the MC. Thank you very much.
No
Going to be
worries.
doing a live show there at the event.
Yes, doing a live municipal, well, pre-recorded live. So it's going to be recorded and then it'll be up on our YouTube channel and other platforms at a later date.
So we've been doing this for a long time, as long as SouthGrow's been around, but it's always been small, except for the past couple of years when we just invited the rest of our partners in the region in, various other organizations, Tourism Lethbridge, Alberta Southwest, another RETA, Economic Development Lethbridge, and others to come together and say, we all have an interest in getting the best education and speakers possible for us, our people here in Southern Alberta, who can come to us and talk about key trends and opportunities and global knowledge that we need to hear for us here in Southern Alberta. So it's a partnership event now, and it's gotten bigger and better. We've got funding from Prairies Can to help make it go bigger and better as well. And last year was our first year of this new model, and we had record numbers in the middle of a snowstorm, in which a lot of people couldn't come, but still record numbers. And so hopefully the weather's better this year around. But it'll be a great opportunity to focus on the issues that matter to Southern Albertans, folks south of Calgary, in this agricultural heartland that just drives opportunities for all of us.
While it was a snowstorm last year, there might be middle of an election
Yeah.
this year. So who knows? Peter, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me. This has been eye-opening. I'm looking forward to being the MC for the event in March, and I'm looking forward to visiting and meeting some more of your SouthGrow members, because as I tour across this great province, I learned so much from the municipal leaders, and the bunch down here are colorful. Let's say it that way.
With zero offense to other folks, we have the best folks in all of Alberta down here. But
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite streaming platforms and follow us on social media. For even more content and learn more about the stories and people we feature on this show, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and your community, and help us keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you back here on Municipal Affairs. Till then, everyone.